"Where's my sailboat?" I shouted the question at nobody. At the empty slip where 38 feet of restored teak and fiberglass should have been sitting, rocking gentle against the dock lines, the way she had every single morning for the past 4 years. The rope that should have held her was just gone, coiled neatly on the dock like someone had taken the time to tie it off properly before leaving with everything that mattered. That detail was almost worse than if they'd just cut it and run. Someone had been careful about stealing my whole life. My son-in-law came around the corner of the boathouse holding a coffee cup like he hadn't just detonated a bomb in the middle of my morning. In his other hand, he was still holding my spare key, the one I'd given him 3 days earlier, so he could check on things while I was up in Charlotte for my cardiologist appointment. He looked at me the way you look at someone you've already decided isn't going to matter to you anymore. "I sold her," he said. No hesitation, no stammer. Just laid it down flat like he was telling me the weather. "Rachel needed the money for the studio. I figured you'd finally get it." I felt something in my chest go very quiet, the way a room goes quiet right before a storm hits, when even the birds know to stop singing. That boat wasn't just wood and fiberglass to me. It was the last thing my late wife Carol and I had built together with our own hands, the last promise I'd made her, and this man, standing in front of me, holding my own key, had sold it for a business that hadn't sold a single painting yet. My name is Harold Kessler. I'm 68 years old, and for 31 years I ran the boatyard just outside Beaufort, South Carolina, teaching half the county how to rebuild hulls and rewire old engines. I know wood. I know salt water. I know how to fix nearly anything a person could break. What I didn't understand until that Tuesday morning was how fast a person you welcomed into your family could take apart everything you'd spent a decade holding together, using nothing but a single sentence and somebody else's spare key. If you'd told me a month before that my daughter's husband would do something like this, I would have laughed you right off my dock. That's the part that still sits wrong with me, if I'm being honest with you the way I'd be honest with a neighbor over the fence. Not the money. The disbelief that a person I'd fed Thanksgiving dinner to for 6 straight years could look me in the eye and call it nothing. 7 years ago, my wife Carol passed from ovarian cancer. It took her slow, the way these things sometimes do. So you get the cruelty of watching someone fade while they're still sitting right there across the kitchen table from you, still laughing at your jokes, still worrying about whether you're eating enough vegetables. Before she got sick, Carol and I used to sit out on the back porch with a chart of the intracoastal waterway spread across our laps, tracing routes with a pencil, circling little marinas in Georgia and the Florida Keys we swore we'd tie up at once. I finally retired from the yard. Retirement came. Carol didn't make it there with me. For almost 11 years, I quietly put money aside every month. No new truck, no fishing trips with the guys. Every spare dollar folded into an envelope I kept in my toolbox, labeled simply, "the boat." My neighbors thought I was out of my mind when I finally bought a beat-up 26-year-old sloop instead of something newer with all the electronics. They didn't understand. That old hull wasn't a purchase. It was a promise I was keeping to a woman who never got to stand on her own deck. I spent 9 months restoring her myself. New rigging, a rebuilt diesel engine, teak decking I sanded down by hand on Saturday afternoons until my knuckles bled. I kept Carol's chipped blue teapot in the tiny galley cabinet. Her reading glasses stayed clipped to the chart table. Her photograph, the one from our honeymoon in Charleston, sat wedged into the corner of the little mirror above the sink, so she'd still be riding along with me in her own way. Every evening after supper, I'd walk down to the marina and just sit in the cockpit for an hour, imagining the coastline ahead of me, imagining her laugh carrying over the water the way it used to. 3 days before everything came apart, I drove up to Charlotte for a heart checkup, the kind of routine appointment that turns into an overnight stay when your cardiologist wants one more look at something. Before I left, I handed my spare marina key to my son-in-law, David. "Just keep an eye on things," I told him. "Make sure she's tied up tight if any weather rolls through." He said, "You got it, Harold. Don't worry about a thing." I had no idea those 5 words would cost me 11 years of my life. When I pulled back into the marina lot that Tuesday, something felt wrong before my mind even caught up with my gut. The slip was empty. I told myself maybe the yard had pulled her for routine maintenance without calling me first. I walked the length of the dock twice, checking every other slip like she might have simply drifted somewhere and tied herself off out of habit. Panic climbed up my spine before I could name it. I ran up to the boathouse office. Nothing there either. Nobody had logged any maintenance work. My hands were shaking by the time I called David. Silence on the line first. Then, I'll be right there. He showed up 20 minutes later with Rachel climbing out of her Lexus in oversized sunglasses, carrying a leather portfolio bag I'd never seen before. David wouldn't look at me at first. Finally, he said it. I sold her. The words landed like a fist to the sternum. You what? I said. My wife needed $42,000 to open her art studio downtown, he said, like that explained a single thing in this world. Rachel crossed her arms. I've been talking about this gallery space for 2 years, she said. It's just an old sailboat. It's a sloop, I said. It's the only thing I have left of your mother-in-law's dreams. Whatever, she said, and I felt something in me crack clean down the middle. David rubbed the back of his neck the exact way he used to when he was 23 and got caught fudging numbers on his first job application. Harold, he said, you weren't even using her half the year? I was gone 3 days, I said. You'll survive, he said. I want to be honest with you. If that had been me standing where he stood, watching a man's whole face collapse like mine must have, I don't know if I could have kept talking. But he kept going anyway. We needed the money, he said. No, I told him quiet as I could manage. You wanted it. Neither of them had an answer for that. The marina regulars were already pretending not to watch from their own boats. Nobody said a word. Somehow that silence sat heavier on me than shouting ever could have. I walked into the boathouse without another word. David followed, saying, Come on, Harold, don't make this a whole thing, like I was the unreasonable one in this story. I opened my old tackle box, where I kept the restoration log. Every receipt from 9 months of rebuilding that hull, taped carefully into a spiral notebook. 11 years of saving, 9 months of work, hundreds of quiet evenings. For about 2 seconds, something in David's face actually softened. Then Rachel called out from the parking lot that they were late meeting the gallery landlord, and his expression hardened right back up. Life goes on, he said, and they left. I sat alone in that boathouse until the sun dropped behind the water tower. I wasn't angry by the time the light finally went. I was just hollowed out. Carol's photograph sat on my workbench, smiling like she didn't know yet what had happened to her boat. I finally got her ready for you, I whispered to the picture. And now she's gone. That hurt worse than I expected it to. Not the money. The fact that someone I'd folded into my own family believed my dream was theirs to cash in without so much as a phone call. If you've ever stood in a room where the person who was supposed to protect your trust looks straight through you instead, you already know exactly what that particular silence feels like. It doesn't announce itself. It just settles on your chest and stays there. Around 7 that evening, I called my insurance agent, hoping for some kind of quick answer. She told me that because David had legitimate access to the marina and the paperwork stored in my glove box, this might end up a civil matter instead of straightforward theft. Then I called the sheriff's office. The deputy who came out was kind, patient, and ultimately about as useful as a screen door on a submarine. If your son-in-law had permission to be on the property, he said carefully, this might need to run through an attorney instead of us. Attorney. Civil matter. None of those words belonged anywhere near a boat I'd spent 11 years earning. At 8:40 that night, my phone rang. The caller ID showed a name I didn't recognize, Low Country Yacht Brokers. I almost let it roll to voicemail. Instead, I answered. This is Harold, I said. Mr. Kessler, a nervous voice said. My name's Danny. I'm the sales manager here. I'm calling about your sloop. My stomach dropped clean through the floor. I know, I said. There was a long pause. Sir, he said, his voice dropping almost to a whisper, you left something on board. I frowned. I emptied that boat myself before I left town, I told him. Nothing should be on there. It was hidden, he said. Hidden, I repeated. I think you need to come down here, he said. I don't remember much of the drive out to that brokerage. I remember my knuckles going white on the wheel, every stoplight lasting an eternity. Danny's voice kept looping through my head. You left something on board, and none of it made a lick of sense to me. The brokerage sat tucked behind a row of storage units off Highway 21, the office lights already dimmed for closing. Danny met me at the door before I'd even cut my engine. He looked younger than I'd pictured on the phone, maybe 35. Clean-cut, clearly uncomfortable in his own skin. Mr. Kessler, he said, I'm real sorry about all this. Can I see her? I asked. Not yet, he said. There's something you should see first. He led me back through the service bay where my sloop sat up on stands under fluorescent lights. Seeing her again nearly stopped my heart outright. Carol's little brass compass still hung by the companionway. The teak I'd sanded by hand gleamed under the shop lights exactly the way I'd left it. I laid my palm flat against the hull before I could stop myself. "I'm sorry," I whispered to her, like she could somehow hear me through all that fiberglass. Two mechanics stood near the stern. One of them, an older fellow with a gray beard and forearms like rope, walked over. "You Harold?" he asked. I nodded. "You did beautiful work on this, old girl," he said. I thanked him, my voice not quite steady. "We almost missed it," he said. "Missed what?" I asked. "The compartment," he said. "Come aboard." We climbed up together. The older mechanic knelt beside the settee cushions in the main cabin and pried up a section of the cabin sole I had walked across 100 times during 9 months of restoration without ever once noticing it wasn't original. Underneath was a narrow waterproof box, sealed and bolted into the hull itself. "I've owned this boat 6 years," I said. "I had no idea that was there." Danny unlocked it with a small key resting on top. "We had to cut the original seal to get it open," he said, and carefully lifted the lid. For a moment, none of us said a single word. The first thing I recognized was my wife's handwriting. Not because anyone had told me, because there was an envelope with my name written across the front in her own hand. Harold. My heart stopped clean in my chest. I reached in with hands that wouldn't hold still. A leather-bound logbook, a folded nautical chart, its creases worn soft from handling, a handful of photographs going yellow at the corners. And underneath everything, a thick envelope sealed with a smear of dark blue wax, and across the front in Carol's careful handwriting, 6 words. "For our journey south, when you're ready." I could not breathe. Danny and the mechanic stepped quietly off the boat and left me alone with it. The only sound left was water lapping against the hull and the distant hum of the highway. I opened the logbook first. Page after page in her handwriting, marina names, restaurant recommendations, little notes scattered beside almost every stop. "Best shrimp in 3 states, right here. Harold will want to watch the sunrise from this exact spot. Don't let him rush past the lighthouse." Halfway through, I had to stop reading. The words were blurring on me. Carol had planned this whole route years before her diagnosis, and she never once stopped believing we'd make it together. Neither had I. I just hadn't known she'd left proof of it, hidden beneath my own cabin sole the entire time. If you've ever found something a person you loved left behind for you, something they never got the chance to hand you themselves, you already know there's no bracing yourself for that. It arrives exactly when it wants to, whether your heart's ready or not. A soft knock came from the companionway. Danny stood there. "Sorry to interrupt," he said. I wiped my eyes and asked him how they'd even found the compartment in the first place. "Our inspection tech noticed the sole sounded hollow in one spot," he said. "We think a previous owner built it in decades ago, long before you ever bought her. Then we found this," and he nodded toward the logbook in my lap. "Figured it belonged to somebody who loved this boat." "You'd be right," I said. "Can I ask you something?" I said. "Why didn't the buyer just take her and sail off already?" "Because once we found that compartment," he said, "state law requires we report any personal property discovered before we can finalize a sale." "So the paperwork isn't finished," I said. "It isn't," he said. "The buyer hasn't officially taken possession yet." For the first time since David's confession, I felt something besides grief. Small, fragile, but real. Then Danny said, "There's something else, Mr. Kessler. Your son-in-law wasn't listed anywhere on the title." I blinked at him. "He wasn't," I said. "No, sir," he said. "Everything on file shows the titles belong solely to you this whole time." "That's me," I said. "Exactly," he said. "He presented what looked like your signature on the bill of sale." "I never signed a thing," I said. His face went serious. "I was hoping you'd say that," he said. A chill ran straight through me. Forgery. The word settled into my chest like a stone dropped in still water. My son-in-law hadn't just betrayed my trust. He'd committed an actual crime. "I don't want him arrested," I told Danny, the words surprising even me. "I understand," he said gently. "But we do have to protect everyone involved, including the buyer." He put down a deposit. "He's furious. Understandably. We've frozen the whole transaction while this gets sorted. So she's still mine," I said. "As far as we're concerned, yes," Danny said. I closed my eyes right there in the cockpit and, for the first time in a long day, let myself actually breathe. The next morning I sat across from an attorney named Patricia Alvarez, a woman who'd spent nearly 25 years untangling exactly this kind of family wreckage. She listened, without interrupting once, took careful notes, And when I finished, she closed her notebook and looked at me steady. "Harold, I don't want revenge," I told her, before she could even ask. "I just want my boat back." "I think you'll get that," she said. "And David?" she asked. "That depends what you decide to do next." "I don't follow," I told her. "You have every legal right to pursue this as a criminal matter," she said. I looked down at the floor. "He's still married to my daughter," I said. She didn't argue with me. She just asked one question. What would Carol want? I already knew the answer before she'd finished asking it. She'd want accountability, not destruction. Patricia smiled a little, like she'd expected exactly that. "Then let's get your property back first," she said. "And after that we give your son-in-law one real chance to tell the truth before the law does it for him." Walking to my truck afterward, my phone rang. David. I watched his name sit on the screen a long moment before I answered. "Harold," he said, his voice already shaking. "I think we've got a problem." I stood in that parking lot, watching a couple of pelicans circle the marsh grass, and it struck me how strange it is that the whole world just keeps turning, even when yours has stopped cold. "What kind of problem?" I asked, calm as I could manage. "The brokerage called," he said. "They're saying the sale's on hold." "I imagine they did," I told him. "They're saying I wasn't allowed to sell her," he said. "They're correct," I said. Silence stretched out on the line. For the first time since he'd confessed, my son-in-law actually sounded uncertain. "Harold, can we talk?" he asked. "Not today," I said, and I ended the call before he could hand me an excuse I wasn't ready to hear yet. Not because I hated him, because I wasn't ready. Over the next few days, neighbors started leaving covered dishes on my porch, the way folks do down here when they sense something's happened without anybody saying what. My next-door neighbor Ray came by one afternoon with 2 cane poles under his arm. "You busy?" he asked. I told him I supposed not. "Let's go catch absolutely nothing then," he said. And for the first time in a week, I actually laughed. 2 hours later, we sat on the bank of a slow tidal creek watching herons work the shallows, and Ray finally spoke up. "My son stole from me once," he said. I looked over at him, surprised. "Most people don't know that," he said. "I spent years trying to punish him for it. Didn't work." I asked him what did work. "I stopped trying to win," he said. "He had to lose all on his own." That stayed with me a long while after we packed up our gear. Meanwhile, David kept calling, sometimes twice a day. I let it ring through most of the time. Patricia told me the buyer had lawyered up wanting every dollar of his deposit returned, that the brokerage agreed he was owed it, and that David had already spent most of the money with no way to give it back. On Friday, my niece Beth called. She hesitated before telling me she'd seen Rachel at a boutique downtown, showing pictures of the sloop around to the salesgirls, telling everyone, and I'm quoting her here, that some old men just don't know how to let go of things they don't even use anymore. I sat with that a moment, not angry exactly, understanding maybe for the first time that this had never really been about any art studio at all. That evening, David showed up at my door looking like he'd aged 5 years in a week. Dark circles, wrinkled shirt, unshaven. "I know you don't want to see me," he said. I didn't answer that. I just asked him what he needed. "They want the money back," he said. "I know," I told him. "I can't pay it," he said. "I already gave Rachel most of it." "How much?" I asked. 38,000, he said. "The rest went toward credit cards." "And the studio?" I asked. "It's not really happening yet," he admitted. I looked at him a long time. "I have one question," I said. He nodded eagerly, like a question was something he could survive. "When you sold that boat," I said, "did it ever once occur to you to call me first?" His mouth opened, then closed. Finally he whispered, "No." That answer hurt worse than everything else combined. Not because he'd admitted it, because he'd told me the truth. "I don't know what happened to me," he said quietly. "I do," I told him. "You stopped seeing me as family. You started seeing me as an obstacle." His eyes filled up. "I never meant," he started. "I believe you," I told him. "You never meant for it to get this bad. But you meant to sell my dream." He had nothing left to argue after that. Monday morning, Patricia called before I'd finished my coffee. "Good news," she said. "The brokerage's internal review is done, and they've officially voided the sale." "My boat's still mine," I said. "It is," she said. "But there's one more thing. The buyer wants to meet you." "Why?" I asked. "He wouldn't say exactly," she said. "Just that after hearing the whole story, there's something he wants you to hear in person." At 2 that afternoon, I sat down across from a man about my own age, with silver hair, a faded navy ball cap, and hands that had clearly worked outdoors his whole life. His name was Samuel Ortiz. He stood the second I walked in. "I owe you an apology," he said before I'd even taken a seat. "For what?" I asked. "I almost bought your boat," he said. I told him he didn't know any better. "I've been hunting for a solid older sloop for 2 years," he said. "When your son-in-law brought her in, I fell in love with her on sight. Whoever restored that hull cared about her," he said. "That was me," I told him. When the brokerage called to explain everything, he said, "I wasn't angry. I was disappointed. Not because I lost the boat," he said, "because I realized somebody had stolen another old man's last dream right out from under him." Those words hit harder than I expected. A total stranger understood something my own family hadn't. Samuel slid a small photograph across the table. "Think this belongs to you," he said. It was Carol standing on the bow shortly after we'd bought her, laughing, her hair blowing sideways, a folded chart tucked under one arm. I'd wondered for weeks where that photo had disappeared to. "My wife passed 4 years back," Samuel said quietly. "Heart failure." I told him I was sorry. "So am I," he said. We were supposed to sail down to the Keys together. Carol and I had said almost that exact thing about our own trip once. Grief recognizes its own kind, it turns out. He shook my hand before he left. "Hope you finish your journey," he said. That evening I finally sat down with Carol's sealed envelope. I'd carried it around 2 full days, afraid to open it, afraid it would feel like saying goodbye to her all over again. I cracked the wax seal with my thumb. "My dearest Harold," it began, "if you're reading this, one of 2 things has happened. Either we finally made it onto that boat together, and you're teasing me for packing too many paperbacks, or I'm not sitting next to you anymore." I laughed clean through the tears. That was exactly her. She always did pack too many books. "Don't stay tied to that dock forever," she'd written. "I know you. You'll tell yourself you're honoring me by never leaving the marina we always talked about leaving. But memories don't live in a slip number. They travel with the people who keep loving." I stopped reading a minute. 7 years, and I'd barely taken that boat past the sandbar. Not because I couldn't, because I hadn't wanted to leave the water that still held her. "Take the journey," she'd written. "Watch the sunrise somewhere you've never dropped anchor. Eat bad shrimp at some roadside shack. Stop at every little lighthouse, even the ones that aren't worth the climb. Talk to strangers on the dock. They'll turn into stories later." Then I reached the paragraph that changed something in me for good. "If someone ever hurts you after I'm gone, promise me something. Don't let bitterness become the last gift they leave inside your heart. Hold people accountable. Protect yourself. But don't make anger your home port. Forgiveness isn't pretending nothing happened. It's refusing to let somebody else's worst decision become the whole map of your future." I read that sentence 4 times over. Each time it sounded truer than the last. The final page held only a short line. "When you're finally out on the water, talk to me sometimes. I won't answer the way I used to, but I think you'll know I'm listening." I folded the letter carefully. For the first time since David's confession, I didn't feel entirely consumed by betrayal anymore. I missed my wife more than ever in that moment. But somehow I also felt closer to her than I had in years. If you've ever lost someone who left you a piece of themselves for exactly the moment you'd need it most, you know there's no preparing for that either. It just finds you when it's ready. The next morning David called again. "Can I come by?" he asked. "Why?" I asked. "I need to tell you something," he said. "Rachel lied to me." "About what?" I asked. "The studio," he said. "It was never real. There was never even a lease signed." I felt my stomach tighten all over again. "What happened to the money?" I asked. "I gave it to her," he said. "I trusted her. I think she spent most of it, all of it." The picture was becoming very clear. This was never about any studio. It never had been. It had only ever been about wanting. Before he hung up, David asked one more question, quiet and small. "If you were me," he said, struggling with it, "is there any way to fix this?" I looked at Carol's letter still sitting on my kitchen table. "You don't start by asking how to fix the money," I told him. "You start by fixing the man who thought stealing from his own family was something he could live with." The line went quiet a long moment. For the first time, I believed he'd actually heard me. For several days after that, he didn't call at all. Then Patricia phoned with an update. "Everything's settled," she said. "The boat?" I asked. "Can I bring her home?" "You can," she said. "There's one more thing, though." Rachel went to the brokerage herself, demanding they release the deposit money. They told her the sale had been voided. She wasn't happy about it. threatened to sue everybody involved. Some people never stop digging even after they've already fallen clean into the hole, I said. That afternoon I drove out to the brokerage myself. The service crew greeted me like an old friend. Told you he'd come back for her, one of the mechanics called out, patting the hull. Danny walked over with a thick folder, had me sign the final paperwork, then handed me my keys. Welcome home, he said. I climbed aboard and everything smelled exactly the way I'd left it. Carol's teapot still in the galley cabinet, her reading glasses still clipped to the chart table, her photograph still wedged in the corner of that little mirror. I rested both hands on the wheel and whispered, I'm coming, Carol, just not today. I wanted the first mile of this journey to start with a peaceful heart, not one still weighed down by unfinished business. When I pulled into my own driveway, David's truck was already parked out front. He was sitting alone on my porch steps. No, Rachel. Heard you got her back, he said as I climbed down. I did, I told him. Looks good, he said. She always did, I answered. Neither of us moved for a second. Then he said it plainly. She's gone. Packed her things this morning and left, he said, and laughed once, bitter. Guess I wasn't much use to her without $40,000. The humor fell flat between us. He looked exhausted, and not the kind sleep fixes. Come inside, I told him. We sat at the same kitchen table where he'd first admitted what he'd done. The silence between us felt different this time. Before, it had been full of his arrogance. Now it carried something more like shame, and shame, I've learned, is at least honest. I found the bank statements, he said, staring into his coffee. The studio? I asked. Never booked, never real, he said. She moved most of the money into an account of her own, $32,000 of it. The rest went to clothes, a designer bag, a weekend with her sister in Savannah. I sold your dream, he said, for handbags and hotel rooms. No father-in-law wants to hear a man say that. No father-in-law wants it to be true either. He reached into his jacket and set a small velvet box on the table. My wedding ring, he said. I'm selling it. My truck, too. My golf clubs. I'm paying everyone back, he said. The brokerage, the buyer's deposit, the credit cards. It's going to take years, probably. But I already started. For the first time in weeks, I saw the young man I'd welcomed into my family, sitting across from me. Not because he'd fixed anything yet. Because he'd finally stopped hunting for a shortcut. There's something else you should know, he said. It wasn't all Rachel's idea. I complained first, he admitted. About what? I asked. Money, he said. Everyone our age seemed to have so much more than us. He looked around my modest kitchen. You never cared about things like that, he said. I did, I told him. I just cared about the right ones. Rachel said, he went on. Your father-in-law's just sitting on that old boat. He'll never even know it's gone. I should have walked away right then, he said. I wanted an easy answer instead. So I became exactly the kind of man I always swore I'd never turn into. Those words hurt, but they were honest. And honest hurts less than pretty lies eventually do. I got up and walked into the living room, came back with an old photograph off the shelf. David at his and my daughter's wedding, 26 years old, grinning so wide it looked like his face might split. I handed it to him. Remember this day? I asked. He smiled faintly. You gave a speech that made half the room cry, he said. I meant every word of it, I told him. You called me a son, he said. I still do, I said quietly. And we both sat with that a moment, the first quiet thing between us in what felt like months. Then he did something I didn't expect. He stood up, came around the table, and hugged me. Not a quick, stiff handshake of a hug. He held on the way a much younger man might, unsure if he'd be let go of entirely. I'm sorry, Harold, he said, voice breaking. I didn't just sell the boat. I sold every bit of trust you ever put in me. I know, I said. You forgot what that trust was worth, I told him. I chose to forget it, he corrected me. I can't ask you to forgive me, he said. I haven't earned that, but I want to, and I'll spend as long as it takes proving I'm different. I believed he meant it. Whether he could actually live it out, only time was going to tell me that. A week later, Patricia called one last time. Everything's officially resolved, she said. No more legal exposure at all. I've practiced law almost 25 years, she added. I've seen families torn apart over far less than this. I looked out my window while she talked. David was in the driveway, changing the oil in my truck without being asked. Grease up both arms. He looked up and waved. I waved back. I hope he doesn't waste this second chance, Patricia said before hanging up. So do I told her. Autumn came. and my driveway looked different than it had in years. Not because I'd bought anything new, because every single Saturday morning, before I'd even finished my first cup of coffee, David was already out there. He never showed up empty-handed. One week it was new dock lines, the next fresh varnish for the brightwork, then replacement fittings for the rigging. None of it was expensive. That was never really the point of any of it. He was showing up, consistently, without being asked, and without expecting a single word of praise for it. That's something money simply cannot buy back once it's gone. One crisp morning he climbed up from the cabin, hands stained with varnish. "Think I finally got that hatch sealed right," he said. "You said that 2 Saturdays running," I told him. "I know," he said. "But I mean it this time. Old boats always have one more surprise waiting in them," I told him. "Guess that's true of families too," he said. And I looked at him and realized he wasn't joking anymore. He'd finally understood that trust doesn't come back with one good apology. It gets rebuilt one honest Saturday at a time. One afternoon, polishing the brass together, he asked me, "Why didn't you have me arrested, Harold?" I kept working the cloth over the compass a few seconds before answering. "Because prison would have just taught you to resent me," I said. "What did you want to teach me instead?" he asked. "Accountability," I told him. "I deserved consequences," he said. "You got them," I said. "You lost your marriage. You lost something bigger than that too," I told him. "What?" he asked. "For a while there," I said, looking him in the eye. "You lost yourself." He lowered his head. "I know," he said quietly. A month later, a small reimbursement check came through for minor repairs the brokerage had made while the boat sat in their care. Not much, just enough to cover diesel for a long trip. Carol always used to say the universe has a funny sense of timing. Maybe she was right about that too. That night I spread the real chart, the paper kind, not some screen, across my dining table. I traced the route we'd dreamed about for years. Savannah, St. Simons, Fernandina Beach, down through the Keys, then back north along the coast toward home. Nearly 900 nautical miles, all told. I could almost hear Carol laughing beside me. "You're trying to see half the coastline in one trip again, aren't you?" she'd have said. Maybe I was. 2 days before I planned to leave, David stopped by with a small cardboard box. "Found this cleaning out the garage," he said. Inside were dozens of old photographs, Carol teaching my daughter to swim, our first camping trip up in the mountains, Christmas mornings, birthdays, Little League games from a lifetime ago. One caught my eye. Carol, standing beside a marina sign somewhere down in the Keys. "When was this?" I asked. "I was maybe 7, David said. "We rented a boat for one weekend. Remember?" I'd almost forgotten. Carol hadn't. On the back she'd written in her own hand, "One day we'll sail the whole coast together." I slipped that photo into her logbook, right where it belonged. The morning I finally left, my neighbors gathered along the dock to see me off. Ray showed up with 2 travel mugs of coffee. "Figured you'd need this," he said. "I probably will," I told him. "Take your time out there," he said, and I told him I intended to. Patricia stopped by on her way to the office, smiling at the boat. "You finally made it," she said. "Thanks to a good lawyer," I told her. "No," she said, shaking her head. "Thanks to a patient father-in-law." Before I could answer, another truck pulled up. David got out looking nervous, walked over slowly. "I wanted to ask you something," he said. I already knew what it was before he even said it. "Would it be all right," he asked, "if I came along for part of the trip?" I looked toward the empty spot on deck, the one that should have had Carol standing in it, then back at him. "How long?" I asked. "Just a few days," he said. "Where?" I asked. He named the very first marina Carol had circled in red ink years ago. "Your mother-in-law always wanted you to see that stretch of coast," I told him. "Found that in one of her logbook pages," he said, eyes filling up. "Pack a bag," I told him, and his whole face lit up the way it used to when he first married into this family. 3 days later, somewhere along that same red-circled stretch of coastline, we dropped anchor to watch the sunset. The old diesel ticked and cooled in the evening breeze. "It's beautiful out here," he said. "I'm glad I came," he added after a while. "One day," he said, "I'd like to bring my own kids out on the water like this." "When that day comes," I told him, resting a hand on his shoulder, "teach them one thing." "What's that?" he asked. "Dreams aren't measured by what they cost," I said. "They're measured by what they're worth. And never let money convince you that somebody else's dream is yours to sell." "I won't," he said. "I believe you," I told him, And for the first time in a very long while, I actually meant it. As the sun dropped below the marsh grass, I looked out over that wide open water and understood something Carol had been trying to tell me for years without ever saying it outright. Memories don't live in a slip number or a driveway. They travel with the people who keep loving you. And sometimes the longest voyage home only opens up once you've learned how to forgive. Here's the thing I keep coming back to, and I want to be straight with you about it, whoever you are listening tonight. The mistake most folks make watching a story like this one is thinking the lesson is about the boat, or the money, or even about David. It isn't. The lesson is that trust takes years to build and only a few careless seconds to spend, and the people we love most are exactly the ones capable of costing us the most, precisely because we let our guard down for them. So here's something small you can actually do today. If any part of this landed with you, call the family member you've been avoiding a hard conversation with, not to accuse them, just to ask one honest question and actually wait around for the answer this time. And here's something to sit with a little longer than that. Is there someone in your own life you've been quietly punishing instead of letting them lose something on their own, the way they need to? I'd genuinely like to know what you think of David's choices in this story, friend. So drop a 1, a 2, or a 3 for me down in the comments right now. 1. If you think he deserved to lose everything and then some. 2. If you think what happened to him already was punishment enough. 3. If you're still sitting somewhere in between, the way I was for a good long while myself. And tell me where you're listening from tonight and what time it is right there where you are. I always love seeing how far these stories travel. And if any part of this reminded you of something you've actually lived through yourself, whether you were the one who got hurt or the one who did the hurting, I'd really like to hear that story too, if you're ever willing to share it with an old man. If stories like this one mean something to you, stick around here with me a while longer, friend, because there are a lot more voyages like this one still waiting to be told.